Okay, so this is an introduction and the basics of how to play a Game of Thrones miniature game. So you will need the rule book, and if you bought the starter set, which is something I would highly recommend, you'll have everything you need to play the game near enough. So this is the core box, comes with Starks and Lannisters. I've put a review on the channel before, but I just wanted to go through the basics of how to play the game. To kind of teach through, because it is a little bit complex. It's a bit hard for starter players, and with a lack of content out there at the moment, I just wanted to introduce this. Something to really point out is if you've played the Batman miniatures game by Knight Models, this is basically a Game of Thrones skin on top of that rule set. So it's almost an identical game from that, with a few little changes. So first of all, you'll need your warband, and to select your warband, at the moment, you need the app. So you need to download the app onto Android or Apple. And therefore, you'll be able to select your warband. For example, we've got the Stark warband here with all the stats and everything else. This is a 350 point or reputation list. And so there's the Lannisters for the same thing. So you'll need the app running to track everything. You do get some tokens to help track some things. So this is the resources, for example, that you'll use in the game, and you get 3 resources per player. It actually comes with 4 per player, just in case you pick up extra resources through objective cards. These are absolutely essential. These are your intrigue markers. There's 9 per faction, per Stark and Lannisters. You're only able to put out 8 on the board at any one given time. This is your boss counter to show who your leader is, just to show your opponent, I guess, more than anything else. You'll need a load of d6 dice. Now, the core game comes with 5 black dice and 2 white, or 1 white dice, which is not really enough. So I suggest getting at least 10 d6s of one colour, and just make sure you got a different dice of different colour. And I got the same for the Lannisters. So these are just normal d6 with a different colour 1. There are some units in the game that actually enable you to roll 2 of these. So maybe going with 2 from a different colour would be ideal, if you can. These are next. These are very, very important. These are audacity markers. And effectively, you'll have 4 per player. And you'll need those 4 audacity markers, definitely. That's a really important mechanic of the game. Alongside that, in the core box, you come with other tokens, such as objective markers. These are very much linked to your objective cards, and they can mean many different things. So winter is coming, for example, or whatever it might be. So you get a pile of those that are generic for both sides. You'll have your setup cards. You've got a little deck of setup cards. In terms of other codes, you've got numbered counters. These are useful for tracking certain different things, especially you can use them as turns. So they have timers in these cards, in these objective cards for a lot of them. If I try and find one just quickly. So for example, this one here, assigned numerical counters, 1, 2, 3, 4 to friendly models. So you can use these counters for that. Here we go. Place a timer 4 on that marker. Now you could use these, that's what they're for, but I just found it easier just to literally grab a dice and put that on the counter or whatever it might be. I find that easier. So that's what they're for. These are just generic tokens that you can use to track little birds, objective, for example, if you want to match people or certain characters linked with objective cards. So these are really key for use of the objective cards. I'll talk about those in a bit. As well as your miniatures that you'll need for the game. You'll also need your objective deck. Okay, this is the Stark one. It's Stark specific. You can see that faction specific one in the top right hand corner there. It needs to be a 30 card deck, and again on your app you will select those cards and they'll be there as well. And you can see them on there. This is the Lannister one, for example, I've got there. Okay. That's actually wrong. That's only 29 cards, but yeah, you get the idea. You'll need some sort of measuring device. Tape measure is ideal, but you can use measuring sticks or whatever it might be from that. But yeah, try and get a tape measure for that. This game kind of works off scenery. Scenery is quite important in this game. So this is the scenery from the core box that you get straight out of the thing. I've already talked about this in the review, but it's a really good setup. But obviously, if you've got your own terrain, you can have whatever setting you want in the Game of Thrones universe. You'll need a 3x3 playing surface. Okay. But you can play it on a 2x2, especially if you go down the rep. If you play like a 200 rep army per faction, per warband, then you can probably knock that down to 2x2. That'd be absolutely fine. The only problem is, of course, is the movement. So if you make it 2x2, you're going to be engaging very, very quickly. So ideally, you want to be playing on a 3x3. That's what it's set out to play on. Now, the objective cards, I will come to those a bit later. I'm going to talk about the basic actions of the game and how the flow and the different phases of the game and how that works in terms of playing your first game. Okay, preparing and setting up the game. First of all, you'll need a gaming area. This needs to be a 3x3 foot board area. You'll need terrain that you've mutually agreed upon, a setting. So this is literally just on a ruins of a settlement that we've got here from the core game. But it could be King's Land, it could be in a forest, it could be in the wilds of the north, whatever it might be. Then what you're going to do is you just choose on a scenario. Now, most of the time, certainly in the first what's out there at the moment, you're literally going to just have a clash. That's all that's there. There are different encounter cards, which I'll talk about in a second. But before you do that, you decide on a roll-off. We do a roll-off to see who will be setting up first. So the grey is going to be Lannister and the pink is Stark. And you see that Stark win on the initiative roll-off. So from the initiative roll-off, the first thing we do is you get your encounter cards, the deck of encounter cards. You give that a shuffle. And then the player draws the card. Now the person, who was the Starks in this case, looks at this and decides on where they'd want to deploy. This one's very even out, okay? So they might just want to look on the different board states. You can just say which way north, it doesn't really matter. But you can decide on where you want to deploy on the board. So for example, the Starks might go, you know what, I'll go with B. And we'll keep in that direction, okay? So therefore, they'll be deploying in these zones here. What you'll need to do is once your encounter card has been chosen, you need to read it. So it says before deploying models, but after choosing deployment zones, each player must set 2 intrigue markers at least 8 inches away from their deployment zones and at least 8 inches away from each other. So it'll tell you what you need to do. Remember, these are your intrigue markers, so you're going to be placing 2 of these out. So you kind of get like a bit of a head start in terms of your plots and your ploys. What you'll need to do after you've placed those out is you get your deployment zones. So in this case, it's 12 inches and 6 inches, a little, the corners, 12 by 6s. And then you'll need to get your war band and split into 2 equal number of models in each, in half. So you've got the 2 deployment zones, okay? So for example, I might go Robb, Grey Wind, something a bit like that, okay? So that's legal. So I've got equal numbers on each half of my warband, and then these would deploy over here, these would deploy over here. Now, the important thing, unlike a lot of miniature games, there's no cohesion. So as long as these are somewhere within 12 and 6, then it's legal, okay? So that's really important, and a slight difference to normal setup of board games. So 12 inches is there, so effectively, and 6 is there. So start of that. So if I place that there, then technically I could place them something like that. That's absolutely fine. I don't know why you would do that, but you can set them up. That also means that if you wanted to get Rob, let's go 12 inches from there, for example. So you wanted Rob, but you wanted these guys to all come close to Rob and then Cat to go somewhere else. You can certainly deploy them like that. So they can get a bit closer than what they would normally be from those different parts, as it were. But you're absolutely able to deploy them as long as you're in each of those deployment zone areas. You would, the person with the initiative would place one of their halves, one of their war bands, first, and then the player 2 would deploy their war bands. So you'd have something that looks a little bit like like this. Okay, so you've got your war bands, you've deployed them. You would have placed out 2 of these wherever you want to go. It needs to be at least 8 inches away. Was it? Yeah, at least 8 inches away from DZ zone. So probably something a bit like, I don't know, something like that, from each other. There we go. So you've got your DZ zones, and that's the Spores of War set up, ready to go. Once you've deployed your war bands, you are ready to go. There are 4 rounds in a game. Okay, so this is setting up the game. Pretty straightforward, pretty quick. Just show you the different encounter cards can be different. So for example, if we look at this, we've got A and B, which B, so if we look at this one and this one, they're further far forward than the other 2. This one is corners deployed. This one's corners deployed. And here you've only got 1 deployment zone with those 2. Here you only got 1 deployment zone. So your war band will be together for those. Here, this one's cool. I've not played this one yet. Ambush. So you've got one of them being the kind of like defender, I guess you can say, and the other 2 not. But then do not divide their war bands into groups and deploy all their models at once. So you've got to split. So B, even though they've got they're doing the ambush, they've got to split up their warband into 2. Okay, so they got half here and half here, whereas A's will have all of them there. You've got Clash of Kings, and you've got Dark Wings, which is different. One will be more advanced than the other, for example. So you set up your board game and you're ready to play the game. So next I'm going to talk about the actions you can do. Okay, so the phases of the game. For each round of the 4 rounds, there are 4 phases. Phase 1, take the lead. This is like an initiative roll, okay? So you're going to roll off to see who chooses who to go first, okay? In order in which you're going to play. So you roll off, and again, Lannister in this case would take the lead. And then they choose who goes first, who has the initiative, in other words. So you don't, if you roll highest, it doesn't mean that you are going first. It means that you get to choose who goes first. Sometimes it's really important to react against your opponent. So you may want to win this to choose your opponent to go first, for example. Okay, really important for the first round, I would say, overall. Now, once you've done that, that's take the lead done. So that's just an initiative roll. Please be aware, we'll come to objective cards later, but you want to play any objective cards that say phase 1 in this round. As an example, I'm sure I can find it. There it is. Winter is Coming is one which is in phase 1. You can see it there in the middle. So you need to play that one in phase 1. Next, we have the Raise the Plan. So your 4 Audacity markers, you're going to choose which of your models will gain Audacity. This is really important because the people with Audacity will be able to do all 3 of the different actions in their turn. If they do not contain one of these Audacity markers, they only get to do 1 of those actions, unless stated by a special rule. So, for example, cat. There we go. So, maybe not that actually. I'll probably go with this. So I've decided on which 4 of my models as the Starks have now got Audacity. And then it's the same with the Lannister player. Now, on the app, if we go to games, and let's just go with Lanny will do. Right. You'll notice on here, I know this has already been done, but you'll notice here you've got who you're choosing Audacity markers with, okay? So, for example, you click on those, and then you can see on the app who's got the Audacity markers. Obviously, this is done in round 4 because this is a previous game. But effectively, you will do that as well. So you've placed out your Audacity. We know which miniatures are going at which time. Also, any number of objective cards you wish to play out of your hand that have phase 2, you'll need to play now. And this is where you'll assign those numerical counters. So, for example, if the Starks played this one out, they would place the numerical counters at this point. We'll come to objective cards, as I say, in more detail in a little bit. But once you've decided on which ones you've done the raise the plan. So just to talk about the 3 actions, because next phase is execute the plan. This is where the person who has the initiative from the person who's decided from the roll-off in phase 1 starts with one of their models. They will activate, then their opponent will activate, and it goes back and forth until everyone has activated. If one player has less models than the other player, they will get that many pass markers. So, for example, if the Lannisters had 3 less models than the Starks, they would have 3 pass markers that they were able to use at any time. If at any point during the game, during this phase 3, they execute the plan, that changes. The number of models, different numbers of models change between the 2 players. Then you have to update those pass markers accordingly. So that needs to be dynamic as you go through. When you activate a model, you have a choice of 3 actions: a movement action, a tactical action, which is the main action, and a specials action. So, movement. On your little stat cards, if I go to Jamie, for example, you have a movement value. Just to talk about these stats and what a character card has. Let's talk about that. This is the name. This is the alias, Jamie Lannister. This is the base size that the miniature is on. The rank. This can be hand or leader. This is my leader. Then you've got the portrait of the miniature. Affiliation, Lannister. Rivalry. I don't think you've got any rivalry in this. This is their kind of like points cost or reputation to recruit. This is how much effort they can spend. So in this game, it's really important that you look at this effort limit, as it were. Which is what that's technically called, is the effort limit. And that's the wounds threshold, okay? So this is how much health he would have. Then you have the 4 main stats. You have the attack. This is the number of attack dice you can enroll. The strength die. So this is what the strength die typically hits against. The defense, and then the movement. Then you have your weapon, your armor, and any special abilities. On the app, you can click on anything and it'll tell you what that does, okay? If you see this little symbol here, it means it's a special action. So you remember, one of your 3 actions can be a special action. So, as I mentioned before, movement is first. It's 10 inches. But you must always look back into its armor, because this has got the Kingsguard armor, which is heavy, okay? So, unless you want to spend effort, you're going to move a maximum of 6 inches instead of 10. So you have a choice with someone with heavy armor, for example. This is different to someone like Robb Stark, who, as you can see here, has the 10 movement, but no negatives to the armor because it's lighter armor. So with the Kingslayer as an example, I can decide to choose 10 inches or 6 inches. If I go 6 inches, it's just, you don't have to spend any effort. And you can just move those 6 inches however you like. You can split the movement. You can go straight. You can fit through any gap. Now, let me show you. So, as you can see here, the kind of model doesn't fit through, but it's all about the bulk of the body. So he can fit through that doorway, so you just go through it as standard, okay? If a model can't go through it, so for example, the mount is not going to go through it because it's base size, but it's not to do with base size, it's to do with the actual miniature itself. So the miniature is absolutely fine, so the mounting can go through unhindered. When you are moving, let's say you want to go, up, and I just broke my terrain. But let's say you want to go up to a higher level, okay? And what you do is you need to go up. Now, this is something called difficult terrain or impaired movement. And impaired movement means -4 inches. So, vertically, this is 3 inches, okay? So 6 inches -4 is only 2 inches. So unless he spends effort, he will not be able to get up there. So if he wanted to make his move of 10, he would need to spend 2 effort. Now, effort is a resource in this game. So you'll have full effort at the start of the game. And you can spend 2 effort, absolutely fine. You can spend effort up to your effort limit. Jaime Lannister has 6 total that he is able to spend. So by spending that 2, he now has 10 movement, minus the 4, because of impaired movement, gives him 6, 3 to go up, and then he can go 3 to here, for example. As an example, this is the same for difficult terrain. So if there's like a swamp or anything you deem as difficult terrain, just minus those 4 inches and then walk through. There will be some keywords, some keywords that will trigger to make them so they can ignore difficult terrain, things like that. So that's movement. Okay, so you need to look at the armor. You need to look at the armor to see if there's a negative, or if there's a reduction of that maximum movement. If there is, if you want to go full movement, you can, but you have to spend 2 effort always. Okay, so that's movement, and then you can move through any miniature. You can move through any miniatures, friend or foe. Okay, not a problem. There's no control zones in this game. Okay, so don't worry about that. So the fact is, if you had this and you wanted Jaime Lannister to attack this guy, absolutely fine. You don't have to like go round a control zone to get to that. Okay, absolutely free movement in this game. Also, if these two are engaged, so base to base touching, then you can just move out of that. Absolutely fine, up to your maximum move allowance. So movement is very fluid in this game. Do not worry about zonal controls or anything like that. You do need to worry about anything bigger than an inch. Anything bigger than an inch is impaired movement, is the best way to think of it. If it's lower than an inch like this, you can literally just go through it without any negative effects or anything like that. So that's movement. Now, when we come to the main action, which is called the tactical action, you have a choice of 2 different things, either an attack action or a manipulation action. Okay, now I want to point this out now. For those with Inspire trait, which will be your leaders, this is where it's really key about manipulation actions, because this is how you get an extra manipulation action. Okay, please note this is not cumulative. Okay, it's just 1 extra. You just get 1 extra and that's it. So what that means, and you can't do 2 to manipulate actions where you're putting out tokens or revealing tokens. You can only do that once, okay? But it's an extra one. So what that means is you can spend, if for example, if Jaime Lannister had, well, Jaime Lannister is a bad example actually. If we use this knight as an example, he doesn't actually have to have audacity because he's within 8 inches of Jaime Lannister with the inspired trait. Because his rank is that of a henchman, Therefore, he will gain the inspiration, which means he gets a free manipulate action. So he can move, so let's say to go in base to base with this intrigue token and spend a manipulate action to reveal it. Or he can move and he could do he can put out an intrigue token. Or if he's in base to base contact with an enemy, he can attack and then do a free manipulate action, such as putting out a token, for example. So inspire is really important rule, not to forget about, because that's really important for your henchmen. But in general, your tactical action can be an attack, and that can be a melee, or it can be a ranged attack. Okay, so you've got ranged units and you've got melee. You'll see here, sword. You'll see with the archer, bow or ranged. Okay, so this is range symbol. And then, for example, the crossbowman also has this range symbol, and then the sword is melee. So, if you choose to do a melee attack, you have to be in base-to-base contact with your target. Unless you've got something which has, for example, if we go back to this and we go back to this guy here, he's got reach 1. So he could be 1 inch away from the target and still do his attack. Okay. If you want to do a ranged attack, there is actually no maximum range. There is an effective range, and this is quite important. So if you've got a bow, you'll notice it has no range, okay? Compared to if we look at this and we've got medium range, it'll have an effective range of the weapon. Now, if you're outside the effective range of a weapon, you're going to lose a dice on that attack, okay? So a bow is less strong than a crossbow, but has a larger range, and that's how they've done it in the game. So if you've got that crossbowman over here, for example, you're looking at 16 inches to get an effective shot. So the attack action, if you're doing a melee, you have to be base-to-base touching unless you've got reach as one of your keywords. If you're doing a ranged attack, you can just shoot. There is cover in this game, so that's why you should always have a board with plenty of terrain that you can get behind and cover with. Effectively, this man here will be out of line of sight. I know his arm's up, but you don't look at arms. You need to look at either, it says the body or the legs. So if the body or legs are in sight of the character, here we go. There's the archer, and you can quite clearly see, all we can see out there is the arm, okay? So that's how line of sight works. As you look down at the miniature, miniature's point of view, and then you look to see what you can see. If at least half of the miniature body, if you like, is in cover, it is actually in cover, and you lose a dice on your attack. For whatever attack you do, you go to the stats. So I'm going to start with a basic melee attack. You look at your attack value, which is 4 in this case, and this is the number of dice you will attack with. So Robb Stark, for example, attacking this person here. So let's say we got this fight here. Robb Stark will be rolling those 4 dice. You must always add in your strength die, okay? Now this is the unblockable die, is the best way to think of it, and this is your normal attack dice. But before you attack, before you roll your dice, I should say, defender, let's bring up the defender's stats. So this is the spearman. So this has got a defense of 3. So they would have 3 dice in defense. The defender needs to choose if they're going to spend effort to bolster and build up more dice. So if we bring up this, imagine they're just completely full health and everything else, they might spend up to 3. You can spend up to 3. 1, 2, 3. There we go. So the Lannister player has decided to make 3. The defender has to choose first. Then the attacker decides on how much effort to spend. So let's say Robb spends the 3 as well. So there's Robb's extra 3 dice. There's the spearman's extra 3 dice. So this is the dice. Then you go to their stats. You'll notice loads of keywords. Basically, sharp allows you to re-roll the strength die. Balance allows you to re-roll the other dice. Burst gives you an extra dice. So he actually gets another dice as well. So he's now up to 8 dice plus the strength die. Then we go back to the defender and we want to check for armor. It has got armor. Now armor takes away 1 dice. So it takes away a dice from the Starks. So you look at the armor, you look at the keywords. They might also have things like cut resistance, which cancels out. So for example, you see cut resistance there. Excuse me, that cancels out sharp, but all you have to do is if you click on it, it'll tell you exactly what it does. You also might have some abilities in here, not for Stark, for example, and for here as well. I mean, if you click on guard, it's just a keyword, okay? So now once we know what we're rolling, we're going to roll off. What do you need to get? So for the normal attack dice of the attacker, you look at the defense value. Defense value is 3. So Robb Stark will need 3 pluses on these dice. And then you look at the strength value or target on your defender, which is 5. So you're going to need a 5 plus on the unblockable. You roll the dice. Oh, it's a good roll. So unblockable, yes, 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 and yes. And 2 misses. But he's got balanced 1, for example. So balanced 1 means he gets to re-roll one of his dice and see if he hits, and he does. So now he hits with these. So these are the attacks that go through. This is completely undefended. So now we come to the defense roll. So this is where these dice come. And what does he need to defend on? He needs to defend against the attack of the attacker. So that's a 4. He needs 4 plus. However, we need to go to the armor because he gets a +3 modifier. Because he's got heavy armor, basically, this laminated armor and a shield. He gets +3 to these rolls. Now, the minimum you can get is a 2-up. A 1's always a fail, a 6 is always a pass. So typically he's looking for a 4 plus, but he's going to get a +3 to that. So he's looking for a 2-up. 2-up save. And he actually fails 2 of them. Now he's got no rerolls, so he blocks 4. So there we go. And these are the 3 that go through. How much damage is this? We go to the weapon again, and the number of blood drops is the number of wounds per successful hit. So this would be 1 unblockable, 2, 3 wounds. That'll be 3 wounds to this person here, to this spearman, and you go 1, 2, 3, and he's got 1 left. Okay, that would be an attack action. Now shooting is slightly different. So let's say the archer for the Stark is trying to shoot at. Let's just use this as an example because he's in cover. Okay, so he's in cover. Now he's got line of sight to him. Absolutely fine. By the way, this would also be line of sight. You can shoot through friendly models. Don't worry about any of that. Whatever it might be, you can literally shoot through that. Okay, it's just terrain. Terrain's the important part. So he's going to shoot across to this guy. We go to the archer. So let's bring up this time. And bring up the archer. So you can see the archer. Now, you don't look at the melee stat. You look at the weapon itself. And it says 1 wound, 3. That's the amount of dice you're going to attack. And that's the ammo. So he currently has 2 shots for the whole game. I know it's only 4 rounds. But he can only shoot for half of those rounds. He's also got aim, which makes him have extra. So it gives him a +1 to his dice when shooting if he hasn't moved. Sharp. Is that the same as before? Reroll that strength dice. And mechanical means that he's hitting on a 3+ with the strength die rather than looking at the opponent's strength value. So just make sure you click on those dice. Now, the important thing about shooting is it's not an opposed roll. So there's no defense. So what we're going to look at, because this character here, and I've just absolutely broke my standard bearer. Never mind. Whoops. So these are the miniatures are a little bit fragile, so you've got to be a little careful. So I just broke that off. Not good. Never mind. Anyway, let's go back to it. So the person with the sword and shield, here he is. So we look at him. He's got armor 1. Okay, that's going to trigger. So our 3 dice. 3 dice Lannister, plus the extra dice for the strength dice. Lose 1 because of the armor. Lose another because of cover. So this is the roll. What does he need to get? We go back to that defense and to that value. So 3 up, but he didn't move. So it goes down to a 2 up on the pink dice, and then a 3 up, if you remember rightly, on the strength dice. So 2 up and 3 up. Yes and yes. And that's 2 successful hits, each doing 1 wound. So that would just be 2 wounds straight through. Now, if the crossbowman did exactly the same, even though it's rolling less dice, each wound does 2 damage. And it's got armor penetration, so you can ignore 1 armor, as it were. It's still got aim, still got mechanical, still got the same things, but has an effective range as well. So you've got to be a little bit careful about that one when you're going through. You don't need to worry about any defense rolls. There's no defense rolls. So shooting can be extremely dangerous, but you only get a limited number of shots. You will typically buy upgrades, which is an extra quiver for your shooting units. I've figured that out for most of the game anyway, because that allows you to effectively have shooting in all but one of your activations. Okay, so that's attack action. What about manipulation action? So this is where these tokens come into play. So as a manipulation action, you can either set an objective or reveal an objective. So setting an objective tends to trigger things from your objective decks, which again, I'll talk about later. So your manipulation action is really about this stuff, okay? For example, play when a friendly model sets an intrigue marker within 4 inches of a scenery element that is within 4 inches of an enemy model. Place a timer 4 on that intrigue marker. Score if the count is reduced to 0. So in other words, that's setting a marker. So what you have to do, unless you have a special skill, you will set, so let's say it's Rob's turn and he's setting an objective. It has to go in base-to-base contact with yourself. Then you will typically play objective cards because of setting markers. Intrigue markers, sorry. Or your other option is to move in base-to-base contact with your enemy's intrigue marker and reveal it. Now, that technically means you just take it off the board. Again, you might score objectives because of that, objective cards and victory points. But also what happens is another type of character in the game, which is called the court player. They take 1 wound of damage every time one of their markers, objective markers, intrigue markers, sorry, is revealed by an enemy. Okay, so you might list build with several court players. They all take that wound. Now, when they are taken to their threshold, and I haven't mentioned this before, so if a normal unit takes wounds equal to their threshold, so for example, if we go to damage of this one, and we increase that to 4, that unit is now out of the game. It's taken as a casualty. Now, here is the slight difference between this and a Batman's miniature game. In a Batman's miniature game, your effort value, or what do they call that? I've forgotten. Your resilience or something. Anyway, that stat, if you get to your maximum value of that, you're knocked out, you're KO'd. You're not out of the game, you can be recovered, but you're very easy to be taken out. You can do like a coup de grace. In this game, there's literally, you're taken out of the game or you're not. So when your wounds threshold reaches the maximum value, you're taken out as a casualty. Again, objective cards might be taken from that. When a court player takes wound equal to their wound threshold, they come off the board, but they can be brought back in the following first phase of the next round. You have to get rid of one of your audacity markers, so you can be down to 3, but then they come back on, okay? To represent that they're not in a fighting unit, as it were. So you're either setting an intrigue marker or revealing an enemy's or opponent's intrigue marker. Please note, with the Lannisters, especially if you've got the core set, supremacy means that you can do that you can reveal markers within 3 inches. Also, Cat is able to place objective markers on any Stark character rather than at base-to-base contact with herself. So when she sets a marker, you can just choose Sir Roderick and then put out your marker there if you wanted, if so choose. So you got to check the keywords and stats to help with that. If we have a look at this, I believe, is that Tully's Wisdom? No, it's Strong-Willed. There we go. When this model reveals or sets an objective marker, oh no, draw, that's not it. So, excuse me, Tully's Wisdom. There we go. When this model sets an intrigue marker, it may be placed adjacent to another model with the House Stark trait. So just keep an eye on those traits and special abilities. Okay, so that's the tactical action. As I said, the main action of the game is your tactical action. Next, we come to special actions. So as I said before, some characters, for example, Lady of Winterfell, will have that little symbol after the keyword. Click on it, and they can use this once, one of these per their activation. Target friendly model within 8 inches in line of sight. If that model is the enemy model within 4 inches, search into your objective deck for a copy of Winter is Coming card, add it to your hand and move the target 4 inches towards. So you do what it says, basically. These are quite useful. For example, Jaime Lannister has Spilled Blood. This is a really great one. So interrupt this model's activation and target another friendly model within 8 inches. Move it 4 and then perform a melee attack with -1 to its dice. That's pretty massive. So it's basically an interrupt. Again, it doesn't say that it has to be one that hasn't activated before. Okay, so that could just be, so you do like a double attack with one of your minions, as it were. So if you're using a special action as one of your 3 actions, then you use one of those and you spend the effort. So you have to spend 1 effort to do it, unless it says otherwise inside this text of the ability itself. So effort's a really important resource in this game. So use it for doing special action, for spending effort in attack, melee attack, or melee defense. By the way, you cannot spend effort in ranged attack. So you can't just spend 3 effort on ranged attack and get an extra 3 dice. Can't spend effort in ranged attacks. But also, you might have abilities like Cersei's Ruthless Queen, where this is a special ability, where you do an opposed effort limit test against the target. Now, ignoring it if it's friendly. So if she's trying to cause one of the enemies to move, so for example Robb, she'll do a opposed test. Now normally this is 2d6, and if we have a little look at Robb, for example, his effort limit's 7, so you need a 7+ on these 2 dice. Now Cersei can spend effort, 1 effort, to increase this to 3d6 and choose the best 2. So that might be a case, especially if you're trying to get 7. So there we go, we've got 10. So it passes, and then she can move Robb as an example. So that is another different type of action you can do as an opposed action, which will tend to be on the special actions in terms of what that's doing. But that's what an opposed skill test is. So they're your actions you'll be doing in phase 3 of the game. Finally, phase 4 is something called the recount phase. Now, this is kind of like your cleanup phase, I guess you say in most games. So if you've got any abilities that trigger in the recount phase, you would do that first. Then you score any objective cards. A lot of the objective cards, and I'll talk about objective cards a bit later, but we'll have this symbol here meaning end of round. This is when they trigger in the recount phase. And then any skill rolls that the model needs to take for status effects, things like poison or whatever it might be. Once you've done that, you finish the round, you click finish round on here, it'll say finish round here. You click that, and then you move to the next round, okay? You do that until you've played 4 rounds, or until the end of the round where the opponent's warband has been taken out. as casualties, which would be very unlikely. So it's typically after 4 rounds. Okay, so a really important part of this game, absolute fundamental on how the gameplay actually works, is through these objective cards. You'll have a 30 card deck. I just want to talk about what they mean. So first of all, the big number at the top in the black banner is talking about the victory points if you meet it as an objective. The next number down, smaller number down the bottom below it, is the number of these cards that you have to take in your deck. Have to take in your objective deck. You've got the name of the ability there. So if you remember, Cat's ability allows you to go into your deck and pick out a Winter is Coming card from your deck. So that's there to denote what the name is. This is the faction. So this is Stark as an example. And then you've got this top section and a bottom section to each card. This is the objective section. So this is how you win victory points. And this is your resource action. Now, on your turn, on a model's activation, they can play one of these cards as a objective card and one of these cards as a resource action. That's every model. Okay, they do not have to have the Audacity marker to be able to do that. That means you hopefully will be playing out lots of these objectives in the game. And you typically, for a 350 point army list, you're probably looking at about 30, 35 points in a game, which is about a standard score. It's a good score, that, to be fair. Like 20, I would say anything from about 20 to 40 is the range you should be looking for to score objectives. Now, next you've got a few other symbols. Don't worry too much about this first one. This is just like if it's an attack, if it's control, defense, or a violence, I think this one's called. So you've got these different types of objectives that you can play. This is really important. This is the phase in which you can play the card. Okay, so this is the phase you play the card in. So phase 1, 2, 3, the main phase, is where most of your objective cards will be played, and 4. So you've got the 4 phases of the game, and that's what it triggers on. Then this last symbol is when do you score it. So this is end of round. Remember, in phase 4, when you come to score objectives. Then you've got this symbol here. This means instant. So you'll score this immediately once you trigger what it's asking you. And then a lot of them will be this one here. Now this symbol means it's played out until it meets its objective. This is really important. This is where most of your objectives will come from, okay? So the idea is you play this out when you've played a model's activation, then your opponent can see what you're trying to score and can try and stop you from scoring that. So these are really key. This is what brings about the narrative and the flavor of the game. These objective cards are brilliant for doing that. So that's what those symbols mean. So always keep an eye on whether it's a little timer, whether it's an instant, or whether it's a staying out until it's met its objective. Then at the bottom, you've got the resource action. Remember, you get 3 resources per turn, okay, to spend on. So this is the amount of resources it costs. This costs 1. This costs 1. This costs 0. This costs 0. And this costs 1. Now you can burn it instead, which means literally discard a card. Or burn for 0. For 0 cost or whatever it might be. Burn for 1 cost, whatever it might be. So you can burn them for resources instead. Most won't stay in play, by the way. Most will just happen, okay? So, for example, I place this card aside. There's another one aside. Enemy markers. Play at start of a... Oops, get rid of that glare. Play at start of a model, an enemy model's activation. If the model ends a move or place within 4 inches of a friendly intrigue marker, move a friendly model 4 inches directly towards it, okay? Now, friendly means your models, the person playing the card. Enemy means your opponents, okay? So just be aware of that. So you can remember, you can use these cards for either or. You'll have 4 cards in your hand at any one time. whenever a card is taken from your hand, whether it's being used as an objective card, scored as an objective card, or used as a action, anything discarded goes face down on the bottom of your deck. But you always have to draw up to 4. You always have to make sure you've got 4 cards in your hand at all times. Okay, no matter what the reasons. If your opponent discards cards, you draw back up. Okay, always got 4 cards in your hand to deal with and think about. You'll need to keep a track of these, and more importantly, you'll need to make a track of any of your opponent's cards that are out being played at that given time, because that's what they're aiming to try and meet those objectives for. You may not be able to do anything about it, but it's a really important part of the game, and it's an absolute essential part, and it's what gives the game its flavour. Those key words that we saw, they really help put a theme and make these miniatures and these characters really thematic. But these objective cards are absolutely key to make your faction feel really thematic and also build that narrative for each game that you play. So that's objective cards. When to play them, how to score them. So it tells you always about here. So you have an italics and then you have a normal. So italics are what you'll do to set it up. And then it says in bold what it is that you score. Okay, how you score it. So instant won't have italics because you're basically meeting that objective. Whereas something in italics, for example, you'll play this in round 3. At the start of the recount, target 2 friendly intrigue markers. That's what you're going to do. And then if there is another intrigue marker that is within 5 inches of both targets, then you score the objective. Okay, in that recount phase, remember. That's what the little timer icon means. So you kind of will get to know your objective deck, and yes, you can 100% build your objective deck as well. And as you get to know your deck, you will find the game flows a lot easier, okay? You might want to start in your very first game actually ignoring objective cards. Just get a handle of how the game flows and the different actions and how the different actions work. It means that these markers are absolutely pointless, so you won't even bother with those. But it will help you just get into it. So maybe just get 3 miniatures, maybe play just 100 points or 100 rep. Just get the idea of movement, of attack actions, most importantly, and special abilities, and get to learn some of those key words, okay? Then, in your second game, you can introduce the objective deck and the intrigue markers. And then that'll come about, and you'll kind of understand how that works, and you'll know your characters more. It can be very daunting in your first game trying to learn this and all the keywords. You'll be like, what's she do? How I'm supposed to remember that does that, and that does that, and that triggers off that. It could be extremely daunting, but you'll pick it up. Only play a few games, 2 or 3 games, and you'll know mostly what your characters do, and you'll understand your deck, okay? Because it's a starter deck, right? So that's the objective deck. It's really, really key in the game. It helps to make the games thematic and narrative based, and really makes rich gameplay. This is the absolute key part of this game, okay? But it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to start with. So that's objective deck. Okay, so now you know how to play the game, the different phases, the different actions, the objective deck, and the app containing the character cards and their abilities. Once you've finished the 4th round, you'll see who has the most victory points, and the person with the most victory points wins the game. It's a really rich game. It's not short. I wouldn't call it a quick game. Okay, it will take you several hours. Certainly your first few games will take you several hours. I will tell you now. However, it's so rich in terms of its objective play, and you can definitely create this deck as well. Even with the standard starter deck, you can still slightly create your deck as well. You can list build, and you use the app to list build. You choose a warband, you create a warband. You choose a points, a rep value, and then once you've decided that with your opponent, then you play with that. The miniatures are absolutely phenomenal in the game. I really like the miniatures in terms of how much they are realistic to the actual characters from the films. They are absolutely phenomenal. And it's got a really nice skirmish feel about it. I can't wait for them to expand on this. And in fact, I like, just to talk about this game, I liked it so much that I've bought the Batman starter set now, because I really like this mechanics of this game. So I want to play some Batman now with that same mechanics. So hopefully that gives you the information you need to play your first game. Again, I highly recommend that starter set. It's really good value. You can play it straight out of the box. You got everything you need. The only thing you don't get is one of these. So just make sure you got a tape measure, and I would say some more D6. So a few more D6 and a tape measure and something to play on. And that can literally just be a table, and you just chuck this terrain out on the table. Absolutely fine to do that. It's a lovely game. Yes, you need the apps. No, there are no fan-made physical character cards, unlike the Batman miniature game. Yes, they will be. The reason why they're doing that is to update the stats, the rules, and everything else. So they can do that as almost like a living rule set. But I still thinking of printing out physical cards, so I know the stats and everything else, and I can track it in physical form. But that's basically it. These are the encounter cards that you get with the core set. I'm sure they might bring out some more of these. I know that Batman miniature game, for example, will have more of these, more objective decks for the different factions but different characters, which would be really cool. So you can bring in some specific character cards, would be awesome. But they also have event cards. So expect, hopefully, to see some event cards, which will bring us more flavor and more replayability and kind of richness to the game as well. So there you go. That's the Game of Thrones miniature game, how to play in the different phases. So until next time, keep gaming.